Hello and welcome to Rishi's Books. This video is mostly going to be a review of The Employees by Olga Ravn. As I say in the title, this is probably the weirdest book I've ever read in my 16 years of life. It's weird not only in its construction, but in its kind of, in some ways the story, the plot is, if there really is a plot, there's barely any plot, and the plot certainly isn't described or shown to you. It's more weird in its structure than in its kind of ideas, in that it's a satire of the corporate world, kind of the workplace, office workplaces, and just kind of the way that people work in kind of the modern world. And it's also a question of AI and robots and kind of these kind of classic sci-fi ideas of kind of transhumanism and post-humanism. But it's told through a series of statements like this. See, some of them are longer than others. As you can see, that's one of the more longer ones. And these statements are basically, they're kind of interviews with these employees who are on this ship called the 6000 ship. And the 6000 ship is kind of an expedition sent around kind of this planet called New Discovery. And the employees, they pick up objects. I need a haircut. They pick up objects from this planet New Discovery, and these objects kind of have these weird, I don't know, kind of like occult impact on them, and they have these weird smells, and they feel like they can kind of talk to you, and they're kind of weird like that. Basically, they just have this strange impact on the crew. But then the main tension of the book is not only the tension kind of between the employers, right, the company who all these people work for, who they've been basically sent away from their family and all their loved ones by. And then there's the conflict between the humans and the humanoids. So basically, the conflict between real, regular people like you and I, at least. I don't know if this is you and I don't know if this is going to end up in someone's ChatGPT, but between humans, unless you're a bot, whatever. So basically, the conflict of the book is between regular humans and the humanoids are basically AIs with real bodies and kind of human-like, flesh-like forms, which is kind of interesting because I've been doing a research project on this thing called organoid intelligence, which is basically there's this company called Cortical Labs, which has created this computer called the CL1, and instead of using just regular kind of chips and regular computer power, they use real living biological neurons, which they've grown from stem cells in a lab, and there's like 200,000 of them or something in the computer, and that computer is able to kind of be like an artificial intelligence. So I think recently some guy taught it how to play the video game Doom, but that's besides the point. That's basically what these humanoids are, and the main conflict of the book is how these humans and these humanoids interact. Interestingly, a lot of the humanoids, they want to be human in a way. They feel like it's important for them to be human. They feel a lot of the same things as the humans, and from the statements that the humanoids give, they kind of resemble humans in many ways through their thoughts and their desires and everything like that we resemble and that we credit to conscious beings. But eventually throughout the book, the humans and the humanoids start to kind of drift apart, form disparate sects, and it ends quite, like, I don't know, solemnly because of that. Obviously, I won't spoil the book, but it doesn't end impeccably for the crew of the 6,000 ship. So I think really what Olga Ravn, this is translated from the Danish, by the way, translated by Martin Aitken. What she achieves is not only a satire of corporate capitalist culture, through kind of this extreme hilarity of the circumstances that these employees are being put in, but also kind of a post-human meditation on what it means to be human, and whether kind of created computers and AI and can ever really be properly conscious human beings, which has obviously been explored a lot in sci-fi before this book. This book was published in, I think, like 2021, 2018, 2020. The English translation was in 2020, and that's when it was nominated for the International Book Prize. Oh yeah, I should mention that the book is dedicated to Lee Guldita Hesterland, who is a sculptor who made all of these sculptures. I don't know if this is actually one of the sculptures that she made. I don't think so. From what I've seen online, the sculpture is very, very different from this. But the writer Olga Ravn, I believe, kind of she wrote little descriptions for each of the sculptures in a gallery somewhere, and that kind of those sculptures were kind of seen as kind of like those objects, the objects that they pick up on new discovery, which like feel kind of innately human, but there's not actually anything human about them. They feel similar to something that we know, but they're not similar, and they're just kind of abstract and weird. So that's obviously an important part of the book as well. So I think, despite it being only short, this edition, where the text is like tiny, that's the end of the book, don't read that, is only 125 pages. I think it's bigger in like this is a mass market paperback size, but I think it's more pages in a regular size just because of how tiny this font is. But you can read this in one sitting. It's genuinely one of the weirdest, kind of craziest, but awesome to read. Very fun to read, very easy to read. The prose is good, and it will give you a lot to think about as well. So I highly recommend The Employees by Olga Ravn. And then, for kind of the more update portion of the video, well, I'll say that I bought this book at a Barnes & Noble in Cleveland, Ohio, and then I read it on the plane and the train and all that kind of thing. And with this book, we also got By Night in Chile by Roberto Bolano, which is also kind of a short book. I plan on doing a video about good short books as well, because I've just kind of found myself reading a bunch of short novels. But this one, obviously I've heard of Roberto Bolano. He wrote, I think it's like 2066 or 2666. My dad read that and he says it's awesome. And he says that Bolano as an author is awesome. And I read the back of this book and it just sounded awesome. So I had to buy it. And Bolano, it would appear, is not a big fan of paragraphs. So that's going to be a change from this book, where the whole thing is paragraphs. Actually, I don't think any of the statements have paragraphs, but sometimes the pages are like a line long, so that's going to be a change. But this is still only this is 118 pages long. I just read the last sentence, and it's kind of crazy. Anyway, sorry, I'm watching the Tour de France. It's the final stage, and the American guy with this crazy beard and this long hair just started attacking for absolutely no reason. We were watching the Tour de France for the last 2 days in the Alps, and it's one of the craziest experiences. We've done it a few times, and like, it takes you ages to get there. Take you trains. We rented a car. Lots of people bike, obviously there, and it's kind of crazy. It's kind of a whole all European affair. Just people from all over Europe coming to watch. And it's awesome. But then you get up, you walk up, try and get on as steep like a hillside, mountainside as you possibly can, and then they go past you in like 5 seconds, and you try cheering them on, and then yeah, you like say vamos, allez a few times, and then they leave. But it's awesome, and this is kind of the victory lap for Tadej Pogacar. Anyway, that's not the point. This book is awesome. Apparently, this is what launched him into international literary stardom. It's the final testament of Sebastian Urrutia Lacroix, a Chilean priest and member of Opus Dei, eminent literary critic and failed poet, as he is haunted by a shadowy figure from his past. In Urrutia's feverish last hours, a deluge of memories pours from him, a hobnobbing with Santiago's most unctuous literati, of undertaking a mission to save Europe's decaying cathedrals from existential threat by pigeon excrement, of retreating into Greco-Roman poetry during the darkest chapter of modern Chilean history, of tutoring Augusto Pinochet and Marxist theory so that the general might better understand it. Oh yeah, sorry, as you can see, sounds like an awesome book. I want to read it. But something that I learned about Roberto Bolano is that he was there was obviously like the Chilean Revolution, where this, like, I can't remember his name, but the socialist guy kind of came into power, and Roberto Bolano returned, I think, from Mexico to Chile, where he's from, to kind of help out in this new regime and in the revolution. And then there was the counter-revolution, kind of like the autocratic American-backed counter-revolution coup. And because Bolano was involved in the socialist movement, he was arrested, and he would have been like tortured and killed if his prison guards were not childhood friends of him, and they ended up letting him go, which is why we have all of his books, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, so I'll be reading that soon. But what I'm going to start to read now is On the Road by Jack Kerouac. I've had this book maybe for like a month or something. I bought it. We were playing squash, and then we went to the bookshop to Waterstones, and we bought it, and then we came home. Crazy story, just crazy. I read some of the introduction last night. It just sounds cool. It just sounds awesome, and I've kind of wanted to read it for a while. I've heard a lot about kind of Jack Kerouac and the Beat Generation, and William Burroughs and that kind of thing, and Allen Ginsberg and Howl, and I'm just really interested in reading it, so I'll read it. It's also not that big, but I'm interested to dive into the world of Dean Moriarty and jazz. Speaking of jazz, I just bought this DVD, Miles Davis. Big fun. I don't know much about Miles Davis or any kind of jazz, really. I don't know much about music at all, but I'm excited for this. We also got Daft Punk Discovery, When in France. So, yeah. Anyway, Olga Ravn, The Employees, just impeccable. Read it. Thank you. Subscribe. Bye. Subscribe, then read it in that order. Bye.